And we are live, everybody. Welcome again to this week's Café Hangout.
I am John Pollock, and off the top, I am going to ask Wai Ting, on a scale of 1 to 10, how sick of me are you at this point?
Oh, come on, John. That's impossible.
It's
Listen,
very possible. It's absolutely possible.
okay, you know what? You ask me this often. Sometimes I don't even really know how to answer, but I will say this year, I think we've actually had less of each other than typical. Imagine if we were like in Tampa, staying with each other, rooming with each other for like an entire week. It's way more than I think we're way less than what we're used to.
I think you and I found a groove though with our many work-related trips. I think the turning point, I'm going to take everybody back. I think it was Calgary in 2010 because I remember I was the primary driver for a lot of this, and my driving, I realized, was not at Wai's standards. And there was a period on that Calgary trip where there was definitely a vibe that the two of us were just we had been around each other nonstop doing this damn documentary. And I think after that, we started a lot of times we ended up when we would be on the road, we'd be in the same room together. So it's not even like the end of the day we get to go our separate ways, but we got very good with like giving social distancing. I mean, we were very much ahead of the curve on that.
I think we're pretty much like, we're built for this like type of isolation, you and I. And I think we quickly learned a lot about each other. The fact that we both certainly need our alone time. And, if you weren't that type of person, if you're somebody who constantly needed to be around like somebody else, or if I was somebody like that, I don't think we'd be as compatible as, perhaps we are.
I couldn't do the Braden Davy ordeal. Or not an ordeal, but like they live together, they work together, they are pretty much quarantined with one another at this time. And I mean, God bless them. That would be very tough for me. I don't think you and I could live together.
Well, I guess I wonder if you ask either on their worst day how they would feel about the setup, and they might tell you differently themselves. But nonetheless, like I mean, I knew for sure actually once they started like especially doing the whole Patreon thing, talking to each other as much as they would. Like I always feel like asking them, checking in, like, are you guys sick of each other yet? Are you guys okay? Have you guys tried to kill each other yet? Well, I guess in Davy's case, I mean, unknowingly he he did try to commit arson uh, at night.
Well, unknowingly. I mean, I don't know if it was necessarily premeditated because yes, they have had some close calls with one another. My biggest change in my life was in university. I was living at a place with two other guys, and then once we graduated, we went our separate ways, and I moved to an apartment by myself, and it was my God. Once you go through that extreme, I really enjoyed living with roommates, but wasn't something I could go back to.
No, I can see that. I can see that absolutely. Although, like, there are certainly things I'm sure you miss about having a roommate, always
Oh,
having
it's
somebody around.
I mean, I don't live alone. I live with my family. So obviously, life circumstances change and evolve. But yeah, I mean, in university, I had so much fun living with roommates as opposed to living on my own. So it was a good time. You would come by old 336 every now and then.
Occasionally, yeah, you guys would have great parties, from what
We
I
we
remember.
were we were big into these parties, and um, yeah, fitting a number of people into that small space that would be heavily frowned upon now.
It was a legendary space, which I don't even know if does it even exist anymore. Is it even like the dormitory or like what is it?
It is still there to my understanding, but it was yeah, I think it is still there. Um,
The amount of disease that must be like in those walls, I don't even want to think about.
uh, I mean, it was quite the area, to say the least.
Well, anyway, why don't we check in with our roommates right here, John, in the Post Wrestling Cafe? All of you guys, thank you for tuning in to the Cafe Hangout this week. Well, it's kind of a bit of a special show because we have no guests, really, no even like any big agenda here. Like we just want to open up the phone lines to talk to you.
I won't lie. I think we have been I'm always nervous about like these technical issues and stuff, and a guest just ups the anxiety level. So I
Hmm.
kind of rely on sometimes shows like this. It's just like a peace of mind. Way and I wish we had a way to just record like the 5 minutes before we went live on this show. And these are the things I just don't want to throw in the added complication sometimes of a guest. But we do have several guests that have been on the site this week, so you can go check those out. Josh Gross, Jim Ross, along with all of our regular shows. Tiger Mask review is out. Rewind to Dynamite. Some great stuff.
Tiger King review.
Oh, yeah, Tiger Mask, unfortunately, getting no love during this entire issue. But yes,
Sayama, in that documentary, I must have missed.
Satoru Sayama as Tiger King. Yeah, so we are going to open up the Skype line.
Skype
So
lines.
look up post wrestling and call in whatever subjects you would like to discuss. Off the top, I wanted to chat with you about NXT,
Yes.
and I have heard almost no. I kind of avoided any kind of discussion about the match because I wanted to talk about it with you fresh. And I thought I put this poll out today, and I thought you and I could do the real time poll. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So on three, you're gonna either say loved it or hated it.
And to clarify, I have to kind of pick one or the other. Like, which
Yes,
one am I
yes.
leaning more
We will add
towards?
context after, but your
Yeah.
knee-jerk reaction,
Got it.
okay?
Okay.
So we're both going to give our poll result on three. Are you ready?
I'm ready. One,
One,
two,
two,
three.
three.
Hated
Hated
it.
it. Thank you. Okay, we're in concert then. I watched this thing, and as first of all, I watched this after the fact, and it takes up pretty much the entire second hour of the show. It's done very much in a different style than a match, but this was much closer to a traditional wrestling match than we would have the Boneyard match and especially the Firefly Funhouse.
Hmm.
I can't imagine watching this where we are having this dramatic fight, commercial break, and suddenly we're getting ads for Arby's and hey, Cialis, here is your information, and then back to this. There were like four commercials probably throughout this entire thing that I think it would be even more of a struggle had I been watching this live and sitting through it. It to me was in such close proximity to Edge and Randy Orton that I didn't think it differentiated itself enough. And what I've also found is what I'm going to call the new blade job, and that is using other techniques to get the same kind of reaction from people. That being looking down at my hands, at the pain I'm about to inflict on my friend, tears that are about to come out as well. And I just thought for all of this to lead up to the ending here, and I know I'm really dumping on this, and I'm not meaning to just completely dismiss this from start to finish, and we can talk about other positives, but what got me at the end was Candice LeRae appears, kicks Johnny Gargano low, and then disappears. And we think that Tommaso Ciampa is going to end things when Candice LeRae returns and kicks Tommaso Ciampa low and leads to Johnny Gargano hitting the fairy tale ending and pinning Ciampa, to which he then reveals the jockstrap. And I was almost ready for them literally to show a flashback scene to the start of this fight at the beginning of the night, where Candice LeRae so clearly gives him this covered object. Look, everybody, look at this. It's going to be very important. And then at the end, we get this. I just thought it was an extreme ask of the audience. And I think that there is like a proliferation of this now at this point. So those are all my negatives out of the way first. But I do look forward to your opinion too.
Yeah, yeah. I echo a lot of your sentiment. I mean, I think, yeah, the things we saw this weekend, in particular, Edge versus Randy Orton, did this match no favors, and who knows what the production of it was, what the planning stages of it were before, that the sour taste of, I would say, that match was still on a lot of our lips. It was, I think, a lot more closer to Edge versus Randy Orton than, say, the Boneyard match, in that it was still very much a straight up match, just presented with slightly different cameras. This was not a match that necessarily played with, I would say, the concept of time, at least not in the way, for instance, the Boneyard match did, or, excuse me, or especially Firefly Funhouse, of course. You know, you didn't get any sort of like double replays. Like from all accounts, it was still trying to show you the. Excuse me, I'm just trying to man the boards here. Yeah, the only kind of like playing with time that it really did do was the commercial breaks, where you would come back from
Mm-hmm.
commercial breaks and the guys would be in the same place. So it did not really try to hide the fact that this was not live. This was not trying to replicate sport. But it went on for too long. The same problems that I think a lot of people had with Edge versus Randy Orton, this came with as well. And it was certainly, I think, a bit more dynamic than Edge versus Randy Orton. They had more carefully planned spots. They were fighting in, I felt like there was more meaning attached to, like, every single second, as opposed to Edge versus Randy Orton, which felt a lot more meandering. But nonetheless, this had that same feeling to me, especially when you look at how long it went. It was a match that simply I thought went way too long, and I don't know if we would be having these same criticisms had they gone 15, had they gone even 20.
Yeah, it just seems that but by the end of this one, it almost feels like the difference between a guy going out there and just cutting a great promo off the top of his head versus a structured promo that we have seen the massive difference between. Like, this felt like this is our construction of a big dramatic story, down to every little detail that will be mapped out, that we will have the close-ups of Johnny Gargano putting his hand onto Tommaso Ciampa. And it just felt to me, and it's funny because Ric Flair just did an interview this week talking about the famous "I'm sorry, I love you" moment that he maintains was nothing that was planned ahead of time. That was an audible by Shawn just before the finish. And I think that really grabbed people. And what worked so much is that in that very moment, that could be an extremely cheesy line and it could be cringeworthy, but it wasn't, because everyone was sucked into the drama of that match, what it really meant for Ric Flair's career at the time. And it was almost like this beautiful end to the sentence to this match. And that represents his career, at least at the time. And when you try and take a moment like that and create your own drama, that is inherently a risk. And I think that's where some of the criticism comes with Gargano Ciampa, is that there is just too much construction of these dramatic moments, that the organic nature of them sometimes is lost, and you're not going to get that natural reaction when it's sort of being beaten over your head, like what you are supposed to be feeling as they're trying to emote all of their feelings here that they want you to buy into.
We wouldn't be, like suggesting that criticism if that attempt at creating drama worked out, like I think it has many times in the past with their matches. And it's interesting how Sean is a part of this conversation, because I think from what we know, I think he has a big hand in a lot of the matches that we've seen as a part of this feud, and I wouldn't doubt that he had a big hand even in crafting a match such as this. And everything that they were doing here, to me, took directly from that same playbook that I think Sean used so effectively towards his second run, especially most famously in that Ric Flair match. I think you can certainly say it's made a lot of these matches better. It's worked a whole lot, but to me, it certainly felt in this particular match like it was another overused tactic, much like how Brock Lesnar or Goldberg matches going 2 to 3 minutes was very successful the first couple times it occurred, but then after the fact, after doing it repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, I think we're ready for something different and something new.
And at the end, I'm just asking, why why didn't Candace just kick Tommaso Ciampa to begin with? Have you
Well,
ever been kicked? Have you ever been kicked in the balls with a cup on?
I've never worn a
That
I've never
sucks.
worn a cup actually.
Well, I've never taken a field goal down there while wearing a cup.
Hmm.
But I will say I've watched enough fights to know that this was hardly the pro wrestling definition that you wear a cup and you're impervious to pain. And by the end of it, I was just like, okay, we got it. The cup was the special present from Candace at the beginning of this whole thing. They turned Candace. I guess the jury is out if that will be, because Candace is just such a perfect baby face, but remains to be seen. We haven't seen where this goes. One positive I will add here: I really like the very subtle appearance of Killer Cross and Scarlett Bordeaux in the car afterward. That you have to really be paying attention because they do not hit you over the head. That's there, but that was a little extra at the end. And that to me opens up a lot of things because how was the location of this, the time and the place that Hunter had outlined was, I will text you the time and the place.
Hmm.
And here is Killer Cross. Is this guy in cahoots with Triple H? How did he know where they were going to be? And I really like kind of the story that they're slowly introducing with Killer Cross, who already was introduced at the end of that segment in the ring to set up this match and is clearly going to be a major player in NXT following this.
Well, he hasn't exactly had any influence in the match yet, but are we to assume that there might be some sort of scene that we'll see after this match next week where he will probably have some interaction with Tommaso Ciampa?
I think he has to be tied to this in some form.
Yeah, yeah,
Like given the way they he interrupted the segment between them 2 weeks ago and then was present here, and the obvious question, like how did he know when this was going down?
yeah. I mean, how do you even get into Full Sail at this point in time? I'm sure it's a close set.
Well, this was the PC, wasn't it?
Well, are you sure? I thought it might have
I'm
been
not
Full
sure.
Sail, but you could be right. It just seemed like an empty
Um,
auditorium.
well, beyond that, we also had the ladder match with Io Shirai winning. I really enjoyed this ladder match and the effort from all six. And it wasn't even a match that dawned on me, but it did the second she grabbed this briefcase. And the idea of Charlotte Flair and Io Shirai, I really think that like that's a big
Hmm.
match, and I almost hope that it's not just thrown away during this. Like that could be a really great match, and I would really like to see that. Maybe there's no need to rush to do that title match. She could hold on to this briefcase for some time and eventually cash it in. But I think that match could be outstanding and also opens up like there are with with Charlotte Flair as champion. Like it does set up some interesting matches. But I would say Io Shirai, this should be her unofficial slash official babyface turn, where she can now work with a heel Candice LeRae. She can work with Charlotte. She can work with a lot of the women, and I think she can be one of the featured baby faces along with Rhea Ripley as kind of your two big female baby faces on the roster. But I love the idea of Charlotte and Io Shirai. I hope that is the match eventually.
I would have to think so, and I think ideally we would love to see it in front of a full audience, but unfortunately at this point I don't think anybody knows when that will be. But nonetheless, they do need these sort of TV main events for them to build towards, and I think that is certainly one of the most, if not maybe the most attractive match you can currently make among the women's division. So I think I like the idea of Charlotte being mixed with all the top women currently of the NXT women's division. I think Io Shirai rests exactly at the top of that list. I enjoyed that ladder match a lot. I thought it was full of action, full of, I think, very satisfying, big, creative falls that definitely looked like they hurt a whole lot. But
Oh, that one Tegan
yeah,
Knox took at the end to take her out. Oh my
even the one
God.
Candice took at the end, like right on her back, that right on the ladder, draped across the corner, that looked insane to
Right.
me. Um, I thought it was. I thought Morrow did a really good job. I think Morrow's commentary style typically like feels, like it can be a one man show occasionally anyway. But so I thought it perfectly translated here, where I never got a sense that there was any lull. I felt like the energy was always there, and I definitely had a good helping of pop culture references as well. Did you catch how he opened the show?
What was it? The cats and
Yes,
what was the line?
cats and chicks.
Cats and chicks.
Yes, of course.
Well, he's probably had a lot of them all stored up for this release.
Hmm.
It's been a few weeks since we have heard from
Yeah.
Morrow. So, um, yeah, I enjoyed the ladder match, and that to me, we talk about matches going too long. I thought they were the right length, and yeah, had my attention throughout. I thought it was, and I really liked, the decision to go with Io Shirai. I would sort of like them to take sort of the Lucha Underground approach, that instead of treating this briefcase as like a Money in the Bank, it's the idea that you have to announce in advance that you're cashing it in, and that can be somewhat that differentiates this from Money in the Bank, but also doesn't force you to have to go to this match in 2 weeks, for instance. I think you could you could hold on this for some time. Like there's breathing room, I think, that you could
The
exercise.
struggle right now for any of these shows is to come up with destinations, without any sort of pay per view looming in the background. I mean, unless of course we could assume WWE will be building towards Money in the Bank, and at some point we can assume NXT will be building towards another TV version takeover. But they need big matches at the very least to build up towards, and I think this certainly fits the bill.
And with them taping like a lot of NXT this coming weekend, I mean, that could be something that they build towards. I mean, that is one thing that you look at, like with all of these tapings, is it does force the company to like they have to stick to whatever plans they
Mm-hmm.
have. I mean, that's if you're mapping out so many weeks in advance, it's not like you can change course midway through a program. You have to see it all through, and that will make for, to me, better week to week programming, you would hope.
It's how NXT used to be shot, right?
Yeah, and there was no complaint about it either. That, oh, this is taped. It's, to me, that was never a big issue at all. Nor does NXT have kind of the erratic nature that we have seen at times on the main roster, where you might see things dropped or they just completely go in a different direction. It's, NXT, you do kind of get more of that consistency throughout. So, any other thoughts from NXT? It really was the two matches, along with Malcolm Bivens' new team destroying Scott Parker and Matt Martell.
Yeah, Everrise.
Ever
Yes,
Rise,
yes.
yes.
I mean that team to me feels like I would say at this point a pretty typical WWE, power duo, along the lines of AOP
Chase Parker.
or the Bludgeon Brothers. Thank you, John. I'm sure some guy out there was really wanted the names of the Everrise guys mentioned properly.
Oh yeah.
But I not much to say about that at this point. To me they seemed a little bit generic. We'll have to see, what sort of new, wrinkle to the act somebody like a Malcolm Bivens can bring to it. But beyond that, honestly, not that much notable on the rest of the show, and there didn't really need to be because this was a two match show.
All right, we're going to open it up to you if you have any thoughts on either AEW or NXT from Wednesday night, as well as any other topics that are going out. If you want to chat mixed martial arts, the UFC's plans to go ahead, all of that is open. It is open topics for the rest of the show, and then we'll be getting to the ratings when they are coming out. Probably within the next hour for AEW and NXT. We'll see, because this was an NXT that had a lot more interest, I would say, than most weeks over the past month or so.
Let's go to our first caller. I believe your name is Rabble. If you wouldn't mind just unmuting yourself, Rabble, we will take your phone call and whatever thoughts you might have as part of the conversation on the Cafe Hangout. So if you can hear this, caller, please unmute yourself within the Skype window. And there we go.
Hello, can you hear
We
me?
can hear you.
We can.
Hi, John and Wayne. It's Colm is my name, actually.
Colm.
Um,
Hi.
yes. How are you? It's a pleasure to chat to you, because I normally only get to hear the Cafe Hangouts after they've been recorded.
Well,
But
welcome.
yeah, Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. It was rough viewing, wasn't it? I I'm not sure about the future of cinematic matches in WWE, or at least the frequency with which we've had them over the course of the last couple of days. I think I fall more in line with you, with regards the Firefly Funhouse match. I think I think this method of delivering wrestling matches, it works because it's so silly. I think the Firefly Funhouse works better with it, rather than, I don't know, something like the Gargano Ciampa, or even I'm more in the negative camp when it comes to the Boneyard match as well. But I don't know. Do you see it, say, post COVID-19? Do you see them doing this as much as they have done, at least over the last couple of days?
I personally do not. I think what you're saying right now is more because more so I think because they see that these empty arena matches aren't up to standard, or at least they're definitely missing something. And I think things like the Boneyard match, and more so especially this one, Gargano Ciampa, I feel like was their way of trying to, like have an hour-long match that didn't feel like it was just taking place in an empty arena, like the ladder match, for instance. Because I'm sure if that's what you saw, instead you would have gotten exactly Edge versus Randy Orton, which I think they were smart to avoid. To me, the more I think about it, the more the problem I had with this particular match isn't really so much the way it was shot, but more so the length that I think it took, and maybe if you want to pick further at it, some of the over dramatic elements that were attached. I think no matter what the scenario, I feel like we've come to realize perhaps a 30-minute time limit is going to be a little too much. Unless it was, like that entertaining. How long was the Boneyard match, John? You remember?
It was over 20 minutes or so.
And that was like consistently entertaining because I feel like they always had something to maintain your interest, some sort of like new weird like thing, whether it be like the Undertaker suddenly shooting powers or a big spot. This was a match, Gargano and Ciampa, that I felt like was kind of missing that fun, missing just the I don't know, the wackiness, perhaps, to maintain that length of time. This is again where I feel like this match had a lot more in common with Edge and Orton than either of the matches we saw at WrestleMania, the cinematic matches.
And like Edge and Orton, like both these matches, like I started like where I'm engaged in this. I'm not sitting down dreading watching any of this. Like I go in always with like the open mind that I hope this is very good. And with both, it was almost the exact same moment in the match where it was about, I would say for me, around 16, 17 minutes in for both of them, that I kind of hit that wall. And that's funny because that's probably around the length that the Undertaker AJ one was wrapping up. And there's something to be said. Like once you pass that certain mark, and we've got no commentary on this, and it was also like done in this style, Gargano Ciampa, that it was almost like just doing it to be different. That was the reason for it. Whereas the Boneyard match, it could not be done in any other version than that. The same with the Funhouse, the same with the Ultimate Deletion, all of the Matt Hardy stuff. In this one, like I applaud the idea to think out of the box, present matches differently, but I don't know if I would have had much of a difference if this had been done the exact same normal production wise than what they did here, other than to present something different artistically.
Thank you very much, Colin, for the call. Unless you have any further thoughts.
Well, one unrelated slightly thought, and I've been racking my head about this, and I'm glad that I can chat to two North Americans today, and hopefully they can clear things up for me. But AEW from the off, like even you spoke about it on Rewind to Dynamite about the rankings and that whatever it was 60-second clip of Excalibur. It gave the wins and losses, which they were banging on about at the start. It kind of gave them a bit of weight when it comes to the rankings. But I think AEW isn't using draws enough because Cody and Darby drew, and I'm not sure what it went down in the record books when Jungle Boy and Chris Jericho, when Jungle Boy went the 10 minutes with Chris Jericho. I don't know, is that down as a draw officially as well? But I don't know, maybe it's because over here the biggest sport would be football or soccer. So you can have draws in that. That is a thing that happens, and it's not like people freak out, But in American sports, like, please correct me if I'm wrong, but in basketball, a draw will lead to overtime. American football, the same, I think. I don't know what else. Does ice hockey?
Yeah, no.
Yes.
I mean, I would say like even in MMA, I think the pressure to not score around a 10-10 round, it very much exists. And I would definitely say that's, I never really thought about it as something as, exclusive to perhaps like North American sports. But.
Like the only reason I mention it is because the Iron Man match between Kenny and Pac, one of the best matches of this year, I think most people would agree. But the end of it soured it a little bit for me when you when you set the precedent, which I thought they were very good with Cody and Darby to say that draws can happen here. However, with the Iron Man match, ends in a draw, and then you have the referee taking it to overtime, or was it Justin Roberts announced? Whatever happened, I can't remember. But it basically went to overtime to get a decisive winner. And I just thought it was like, I don't know if we'll ever see draws again. And, if we don't, whatever, it's not a big deal. But it just feels like it is another finish that AEW could use if they wanted to. That isn't a trite DQ finish that we've seen in WWE, which at least they haven't done. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's a finish that they could utilize more.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much for the call, Colin. Please call back soon.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, John, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean it's a finish that you can utilize when necessary, but I also don't think you overdo it either. So, it's AEW's been pretty strict on wins and losses, so I don't really have as much of an issue with how they're going about matches. But draws, that they've used them before. I'm sure we will see them again, but I think sparingly as well. I don't think you want to get into the habit of doing them too often either.
We go to right now Jack, who's on the line. Jack, if you wouldn't mind unmuting yourself, we will take your phone call.
I don't know why it says Jack, but this is Corey from Long Island. How's it going?
I'm sorry about that. Okay.
Oh,
Corey,
no, it's all good.
How you doing?
I'm doing all right. So I did want to put another one in the hat for the Cine matches that happened over the weekend.
Cine matches.
And
yeah.
And so
for or against?
So for, very, very much for. That being said, it's hard for me after a certain point, like the final deletion happened, and then Tag Team Apocalypto happened, and what was it, the Great War or whatever, and then you had all the stuff that came before this weekend. I think we have enough content or enough like predecessors to all of this where I finally get to the point where I'm not only comparing it to its predecessors, I'm just comparing it to like movies at this point. And I realize that is maybe a bit unfair to the WWE or to AEW or to Impact, who, they don't make, well, I mean, in the WWE's case, yeah, they do make movies technically, but yes, movies, quote unquote. But they don't have the robust cinematic background that, a lot of like directors do, like film directors. But when I look at something like the Boneyard match, I'm seeing it's basically Roadhouse. Like I'm watching Roadhouse, and I got into it. I actually really did, because it really played to the strengths of like early 1990s, late 1980s tough guy cinema. And it played to its strengths almost to like a parody degree, like over accentuating all of like the parts about it that made it like fun to watch. And I couldn't help but enjoy it. Conversely, I was actually not that much of a fan of the Firefly Funhouse, less from a conceptual point of view. I thought that it was great conceptually. From an execution point of view, I thought it was aiming for 2013's Under the Skin and got somewhere closer to David Cronenberg's Existence at its worst. And I'm realizing I'm maybe throwing out a bunch of references that might be flying over some people.
I haven't seen any of those movies, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. No, Under the Skin, one of the greatest movies ever distributed by A24. Highly recommended. Scarlett Johansson's best role ever, the hands down. But when you create what touts itself to be psychological cinema, I am immediately going to compare it to other movies that kind of dive into that. Like, yes, I'm going to compare the Firefly Funhouse to Memento. Mm-hmm. Is that fair? No, absolutely not. But the mental link is there because suddenly you're presenting itself it's presenting itself as cinema. And I think, one, yes, unfair on my part, but two, I think it raises the standards in which they have to present these things at. Because the other reason why I liked the Boneyard match more than the Funhouse match was just the production values. Mm-hmm. I think that the production values in the Firefly Funhouse, if they experimented more with the visual effects at play, if they experimented more with different shots, because for the most part, it didn't really have a lot of variety in that. And I think that it could have benefited so well from like a robust production, just like getting really experimental with its cinematography, and which I think is going to be the backbone of all of these. And
right.
Yeah.
No, some very good points. I will say, I don't know what sort of crew I think something like the Firefly Funhouse might have had to work with, and I do feel. Oh, give me 1 second here. I do feel like when it comes to something like that's already so out there, like the Firefly Funhouse, I think to add anything more to it might have made it even more difficult for them to put it to production to get it past. I think just all the loopholes that I would have had to imagine that they had to go through to present that the way that it was presented anyway. But going back to what you're saying about comparing, like being forced, kind of like if WWE is going to tread in this territory, they are kind of forcing these comparisons to actual actual movies that are being released, and I completely understand. I guess I don't feel that same pressure because when I watch Raw, if I see a backstage like this Otis and Mandy segment, I don't grade it on the standard of a great romantic comedy that I would see in a theater. I kind of grade it on the basis of like WWE romantic comedies that they've produced, and ultimately it comes down to whether or not the audience is into it. And when I watch pro wrestling, I don't really judge the acting on the same level that I would judge an Oscar nominee or anything like that. And I is that us having as wrestling fans lower standards for things like this? Perhaps. At the same time, professional wrestling offers things that Hollywood movie doesn't, and that's something that will ultimately result in like live stunt work essentially in front of an audience, and that's obviously different for this Firefly Funhouse thing. But what the Firefly Funhouse did for me was gave me sort of like a mini movie based off of wrestling lore, in particular the wrestling lore of this character that we've been through, we've lived with for the past 20 years in John Cena. That I don't think we wouldn't necessarily get in a full movie form. If we did eventually, that would be something very impressive and very different. But
Hulk Hogan enters the Firefly Funhouse.
Dude, that'd be amazing. So
could you imagine that?
Yeah. So like if you're gonna tell me that you're gonna get that, but it's not gonna look as good as like Inception, I'm okay with it because I'm used to wrestling not looking that great, and I'm used to professional wrestling not consisting of the best acting ability. It's just not what I need necessarily.
Guys, I don't know if you've looked at Hulk Hogan's Instagram right now, but it's its own psychological thriller.
Oh, I'll bet. I'll certainly bet.
Yeah. I'm not gonna even touch that one. But before I go, there was actually one other thing that's kind of connected to the cinematic movie matches tangent, and that was involved the Gargano, Ciampa, and the Edge Orton like no DQ. It's more of a match than it is more of a film format, and that's just simply the amount of stimulus a viewer is given. Like, yes, they have the visual stimulus of watching these two guys grunt and throw each other and do whatever it is in front of you. But I think the thing that gets everyone over the hump and are able to look at these cinematic matches and be more engaged is the added production values of things like background music and just all of the little extra window dressing around it that if you're watching in a traditional wrestling format, which is wrestlers, you know, fighting and commentary, and one of those things is lacking, your audience is going to disengage. You know, that's just what's going to happen. It happened with me with the Edge and Orton match, and I didn't even watch NXT last night. I didn't even bother. And the second someone told me that it was Edge Orton style, I'm glad I made my decision. But it doesn't surprise me that people would disconnect from something that is, you know, lacking a fundamental aspect of the, you know, television viewing experience, at least for a traditional wrestling match. And I'll just leave you guys with a quote from my foundational media theory class from university, and that is a Marshall McLuhan quote. It is the foundational quote behind the entire course, and that is, the medium is the message. And I'll leave you guys with that. Have a good one.
Thank you, Corey.
Great call. Appreciate it. The medium is the message, Sean. Remember that.
Yep. All right, let's keep going with.
Let's go to Steve Kassan here. I'm very interested to talk to Steve. Actually, Steve Kassan, long-time listener, somebody who works in the film industry, and in fact is one of the participants of the Dark Side of the Ring production. So, Steve, how you doing? Nice to talk to you.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, how's it going?
We're doing great.
Gee, my gosh, I didn't know what to expect. Follow up from Film Twitter just popped up. Jeez.
Oh no, I love this conversation. It's wonderful.
Talking about Under the Skin and Existence, I thought like Enemy was gonna come in now. Like I can see John's face is like he's really interested in all this too. Bro.
What's on your mind, Steve?
No, actually, I just wanted to. Like, it's funny that it had to be something like this for me to actually be at home and actually want to like talk to you guys, and because I never get to because I'm at work and I'll usually listen the day after, so it's pretty neat. It's pretty all right, and just want to say way great analysis and breakdown of the Firefly Funhouse, and John, awesome interview with Jim Ross as again, and thank you guys for all the work you do and everything. You know, I've been listening to you guys since the law and all that. So
well, thank you, Steve.
It's been
I'm actually kind of curious, you know, from your perspective, how you felt about some of these matches that we've talked about, you know, whether it be the Firefly Funhouse or the Gargano Ciampa. Like, what is your take on these types of cinematic matches?
I will say I haven't seen Gargano Ciampa, but I did hear what you guys have to say. With these types of matches where editing is involved, I think well, the thing about like the Boneyard match is that I mean, like watching that preview of Taker's upcoming doc, and he says like he does a match, then he has surgeries after. If you can give him something where it can limit the amount of risk for a guy like him, then it's having the use of editing that works, right? Because yeah, you do want to see this guy. You do want to see the Undertaker like have a match or have quote unquote a match or have a performance, have a segment at WrestleMania or something like that. If you can work it where it's not taxing on his body, then this kind of works. And it's usually a fight. The thing about it is that when you watch matches, there is editing involved, right? Because you go to cuts, you go to a wide cut, you go to a close-up, whoever's in charge of it. And the thing about sports is that it is already cinematic. And the best example I can give is Kawhi's shot Raptors Bucks, right? Game 7. That is an entirely cinematic moment. The bounces and everything. You just have that wide shot. Everyone's waiting and waiting. And also with wrestling is cinematic as well. When you do it really well.
Yes.
Shawn Michaels, Ric Flair, that is cinematic. Hell, even Edge and Orton. In a way, the last shot you see Edge standing up and Orton down by his feet. That's pretty cinematic, right? So you can have real drama. Like cinema comes in as trying to achieve what real drama gives you.
So what
Yeah.
what is your opinion of I guess when they try to match, let's say the beats in a match, um, with, I would say, the technical requirements, like shooting it in a different way. Does it make a difference for you,
Well,
or are you saying wrestling itself shouldn't need
yeah,
that?
wrestling. Well, wrestling itself, it's in the TV medium, and already it gives you a platform to make it cinematic as you want.
Right.
Hell, you can watch old, what's it, AAA matches and even old New Japan matches. The way they cut back to have to show the entire stadium, the entire crowd, that's something, because all those, when you watch cinema, like, you get a grand scope of, you get a grand feeling of scope when you cut to a wide and you see everything. It's like, wow, this is like something big, right?
So now, but
And you
given
can,
the limitations that they have without an audience, do you think shooting
yeah.
their matches this way it will be, is a way
Uh,
to hide it effectively?
the thing about it is that it's in a way to hide it, but you still want to present a sports match. You still want to present something like a sport, right? In a way. But all these cinematic matches, like, okay, if you go back to Firefly Funhouse, and even Final Deletion, what Matt Hardy does, that only works with a certain characters. It can't work with everything. I've yet to see this Gargano Ciampa match, and I just want to see how it works. Maybe it should have worked the same way the Edge Orton match did. I don't know. I haven't
Which
seen it
didn't
yet,
work.
but again, it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it only goes to certain characters. And even with the Firefly Funhouse, like you mentioned the thing like about Hogan going into the Firefly Funhouse, like, didn't they sort of do that when he went into the Dungeon of Doom, like all these like segments and everything? Like, it was hokey, it was cartoony, but it was kind of like practically the same idea. And the Firefly Funhouse, that match wasn't as cinematic as you might think. Like, the ideas were present as to give a like entire story and analysis of this character. Actually, a deconstruction of John Cena. That's what it is. And if you go back to those Dungeon of Doom segments, which they are, those are segments. It pretty much is like the Dungeon of Doom deconstructing this whole Hulk Hogan character to where it breaks him down. That's if you want to go further and further into it. But in the end of the day, it only works with certain characters. So, in utilizing editing and making these quote unquote cinematic matches, like, for the time being, you got to do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, when you present a actual live sporting match, and when the crowds are allowed to get back in, it's that drama right there. It's that, and that alone is cinematic. That's what movies are trying to do.
Before I let you go, Steve, I just wanted to ask you quickly, because I know you're involved with the production of the Dark Side of the Ring as part of the reenactment. And I guess I just wanted to, while we have you on the line, maybe if you wouldn't mind talking a bit about that experience and what you've seen of the show thus far.
It's I will say that filming, like being a wrestling fan, obviously, filming these segments, like, I'm in well, I think all of season 2, I play certain different characters, like here and there, and I'm definitely in the Owen Hart episode. I play one of the EMTs that rush into the ring when Owen falls, and it's all very surreal, considering that we're reenacting these moments in life and in death, and watching it put all together is like, I'm more watching the episodes. I'm more interested in the story they say, because it's all about the people being interviewed and telling their side of the story. And I think from what I've seen with the Snuka thing, it's gonna be really interesting. But on the day filming it, I know we're there to work and everything, but in the back of my mind, I would say, it was really surreal, and it was interesting, especially like in the Benoit thing. If you notice in episode 1, I played a cop where you see this when David is telling the story where one of the RCMP officers are telling him, oh, his dad died and his family died. And we shot that reenactment, and I played a cop who had to tell the child actor who's playing David that his son died. So we watched the interview to get the idea of like what's going on. And when shooting it, it's a surreal feeling. It's weird, because you're as I said, you're reenacting actual events. So filming that part and doing all these things there, if you're into wrestling, it'll be surreal. But there were a couple of people there who were into wrestling, only knew about the stories. They're just doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
So, but watching it put all together, I kind of lose all of that and get more engrossed into the story, more engrossed into the episode, and kind of deviate from when I was there, actually. And the thing about it is that, like, when we shot it, like, I totally understand everything. Like, with the reenactments, it was to give like this theater approach to it, almost like this surreal theater approach, and have all this neon lighting and everything. And it was when the Bruiser Brody was the pilot, and I kind of got an idea of like what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Is it good because that's what wrestling is in a way? It's live theater, right? Live sporting theater, and that was the idea put into it.
Thank you very much for the call, Steve. We hope to talk to you again very shortly. All right, let's try to get through some of these other calls. Do Skype in, everybody, at Post Wrestling. Up next, please unmute your microphone. Brandon from New Jersey.
What's going on? Hello?
I can hear you.
We're just going to let you go.
Yeah, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I was just curious. I know the UFC is going to what's that reservation they're going to be in California?
Tachi Palace.
Yeah, Tachi. I was wondering, after this is all said and done, like when we finally are free of the pandemic, will there be repercussions with commissions against the UFC trying to operate in these reservations and whatnot? What do you think about that?
No, I don't think there's going to be. The Association of Boxing Commissions actually just gave a statement earlier today to MMAfighting.com that they will list these events as being sanctioned. So it doesn't appear that there would be any repercussions for fighters that participate, for officials that are part of these shows, whether they be in Lemoore, California, or on this island as well. So it doesn't appear that that will be the case. And it's kind of interesting to see where other commissions fall after, the ABC puts that out there. And are there going to be commissions that are more open-minded towards opening up fights within their state? No, we're not aware of any at this point. The California State Athletic Commission is, they had ruled out any combat sports events through at least the end of May. We know Nevada is kind of not issuing any licenses at the moment either, but those would be two of the major commissions to watch and see if there is any change in course. But in terms of repercussions, I don't believe so. No.
That's crazy, right? Man. It's just
I think, Brandon, I think it's very split among people that I'm somewhat surprised that there are that many that are, kind of, open-minded to this happening. I have a lot of concerns about it. It's not something I think is all the wisest move at the moment, but at the very worst, I only represent half the argument. And if not, I might be in the minority.
I can't get up for any of these fights, especially with what's going on in the world. I mean, I know Dom Cruz is fighting Cejudo, and that would have been big news if this pandemic didn't exist. But I'm not feeling it right now.
Yeah, a few related notes for UFC 249. Rose Namajunas is out of that card where she was going to have her rematch against Jessica Andrade, and just now Ariel Helwani received a statement from her manager, and Rose Namajunas had two family members that have recently passed away due to the coronavirus, and that is why she is off of the card. So, I mean, this is, that it's the kind of example that it really hits home of how this is affecting fighters, and that's why she is not going to be fighting on April the 18th against Jessica Andrade. As well, for UFC 250, which is the next pay-per-view, May 9th, there are now 7 Brazilian fighters, including Jose Aldo, that are off that card because all of the consulates are closed now in Brazil, and they cannot obtain visas because they were going to be fighting in Brazil. Now this will be in the U.S. So Jose Aldo is off the card. Ketlin Vieira is off the card. Mauricio Shogun Rua and Antonio Rogério Nogueira are off the card. And yeah, to Brandon's point, Combate is reporting that there is at least a verbal agreement from Dominic Cruz to step in, although that fight is not official as of this recording. At least it has not been officially announced yet. for Henry Cejudo to fight Dominic Cruz, but that seems to be one option that they have. So, yeah, that's some of the latest involving the UFC news.
Yeah, it makes you feel proud of what Bellator is doing and canceling all their fights and whatnot. Scott Coker showing a lot of character with doing that. I know they're going to lose a lot of money, but he gets my respect for what they're doing. I'm not like what Dana White, that ghoul, is doing. He's just acting like a megalomaniac with what he's doing right now. It's unconscionable. That's all I got. I'm out here. Peace.
Thanks, Brandon. Thanks as always for the call.
Let's go to Jared. Jared, you're on the line right now. What's on your mind?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, man.
Doing well.
Hey, first off, great job on all the different podcasts and shows this week. John, your interviews and you guys' coverage of WrestleMania and everything. It's been a great week to be a patron.
Oh, thank you
so
very much.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed the Tiger King document review. I like the Donald Trump and Hillary comparison, John. Another comparison though. Jim Cornette is Joe Exotic and Vince Russo is Carol Baskin.
Yes, I guess the feud was renewed this week on Dark Side of the Ring. Guess there's
yeah. I'm looking forward to your guys' review tomorrow. Have you already watched the episode or?
I have. Yes.
Yeah, we'll chat about that Friday night. So yeah, we'll chat about more Brawl for All then. But if you've seen the episode, feel free to share any of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so one of the things that kind of came up to me watching the episode is just like, why were Jim Cornette and Jim Ross so sure that Steve Williams would be a big deal? Like in that era of the WWF, I don't know that, like, why was it such a sure thing that, he could be a star with Steve Austin?
I don't know if it was so much the sure thing that he would be, a main event level draw or anything like that. I think it was more so the idea that he would have been the favorite in this style of tournament, given his wrestling background, but not taking into account as well the injuries this guy has been through, surviving that All Japan schedule and style that, Dr. Death, Steve Williams, if you are to place him, if into one of these mythical tournaments, is someone that would at least have the pedigree that you would be leaning on to at least be a favorite. So I think that was sort of more so the positioning of Dr. Death. But coming out of it, I mean, it's a crapshoot to say if it would have been a successful program or not. But I mean, the company was so hot at that time that it would be pretty difficult for a heel in that role to not do great business with Steve Austin.
Yeah, because like a lot of Cornette's anger seemed to come from the fact that he thought that like Vince Russo ruined a friend's career, basically, right? So I was just not knowing too much about Dr. Death. That was just kind of something that stuck out to me from the episode that, why was it seen as such a surefire thing? But
well, I mean,
I think
it was a tournament that definitely affected Dr. Death, at least of his WWF run. To Vince Russo's defense, I mean, he did hire Dr. Death when he got to WCW. Now, you can question the role he was placed in, and it was a pretty tasteless angle with Ed Ferrara making fun of Jim Ross. But when Russo did get to WCW, it was like he did hire that guy for a period of time as well.
Yeah, and then I guess the other thing I was just calling about is, one thing watching WrestleMania that really stuck out to me was feeling really bad for Drew McIntyre to have that win be in an empty arena, because he's not a guy that is necessarily going to get that opportunity again, right? Like there's nothing to say that he's definitely going to be in the main event of WrestleMania any other year. So that kind of got me to thinking, like, what do you think they can do to maximize kind of crowd reactions when they do get back to arena shows? I think that AEW, they always have hot crowds for the most part, so it's less concern there. But with WWE, like, a lot of times they, they've got some pretty dead crowds. But I think when shows return, especially to the States, like, people are going to be so excited to just be out and watching live sports, live theater, whatever. Like, I think that's a really good, there's a really big opportunity there for them to kind of maximize that and, get crowd reactions, get some really hot crowd reactions. And just what do you think they need to do to kind of maximize that?
Thank you, Jared. First of all, I think, one of the big problems is we don't exactly know when that point in time is. We don't know when the crowds will return, but at the same time, I don't think they want to wait to that point in order to execute this Drew McIntyre plan. Who knows what Brock Lesnar's status might be anyway? But I think it's the same thing that I would have suggested had this taken place in front of a crowd, and that's to make Drew continue to look like this incredible badass by putting him up against these like very stacked odds in the form of not necessarily Brock Lesnar, but another heel threat on the level of a Brock Lesnar, and you just continue to have this guy beat everybody. You build up a heel, like it's traditional pro wrestling. I feel like they've done a great job, before everything was kind of derailed, of like promoting this guy as like just a hero, especially in a hero against somebody as big and threatening as a Brock Lesnar. For the first time in a long time, he was somebody that you could buy, and the audience was certainly taken to him. So I think his success going forward depends on the level of opponents that he'll be placed in front of and how they book him. And from all accounts, it seems like they're really willing to book him strong.
I think Drew's in a really good spot at the moment, like a very good spot, as coming out now. The chase is over. He's got the title. I mean, the guy, I think he is actually, just seeing all the interviews that he's been doing, he just comes across so well in the media. I don't know if people have seen the clip of him and Heath Slater on the bump, but there's just a great moment between those two. I'm sure you will see that clip. But I think that it's to be determined once they come back. But I think they're all in on Drew McIntyre, and they should be. I think he was a great choice to be this person going into Mania, and feels like a big star at the moment. And it's going to be contingent as well on what is the next program for him, because there isn't that obvious person on Raw. Maybe you're looking at a Seth Rollins to just build him back up again for a title program with Drew. Maybe that's where you go, but it's kind of up for grabs of who that heel is going to be. We are awaiting on the NXT number. AEW did 692,000 viewers, so it was just slightly above last week's viewership average. So once we get an NXT number, we will relay that over.
692 for AEW. Do you have a demo?
Do not right now, but stand by.
Okay, cool. We are going to open the phone lines for a little bit longer until we get some of those ratings. If people want to call back in, again, you can Skype us at Post Wrestling on Skype. So, John, SmackDown tomorrow. What are you expecting right now?
They did make some announcements about what is going to be happening tomorrow. They did put out, they're doing a rematch between Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross against the Kabuki Warriors. So that will be one segment, at least, or one match happening on SmackDown. These are going to be the Friday is the start of this marathon taping schedule that is going to cover several weeks of programming, maybe as much as the Raw and SmackDowns leading into Money in the Bank. It seems that I've heard that from several people. I think that might be the only, and Braun Strowman appearing on the show. That's all they've announced so far for Friday's SmackDown.
And from what we know, it'll probably be live, you think?
So I had heard that thrown around that Friday's SmackDown and this Monday's Raw, there's a chance those shows could be live. I don't know if that is 100% though, but that I did hear that mentioned as a possibility.
Okay. All right, let's go to another.
What are you looking in terms of, because these shows I think should indicate at least the next Raw and the next SmackDown of, like, you're either planning to go ahead with Money in the Bank, or is there a contingency? Like, you've got to, if you're doing them, you've got to set up all of that stuff. And it was interesting to watch that Sunday during WrestleMania, they promoted it several times, and I don't know if I even heard them advertise it Monday night unless I missed it. But there's no sign they're not doing Money in the Bank. But just, I mean, that's going to have to be made pretty clear, because you've got to do all the setup for it.
What's the date of Money in the Bank if they were to do it?
May 10th. So we're a month away.
Oh man, that's a lot of TV. Like, we're talking.
That's five. That's one, two, including three, tomorrow. 4. 5 SmackDowns and 4 Raws.
4 Raws
before Money in the Bank.
You would think that they'll probably do the Raw after Money in the Bank as well, if they're going to do all these tapings, right? So that's a lot of hours of television to have to shoot, plus a pay-per-view. At the same time, what choice do they have, right? You're taking the risk of flying everybody in for these matches anyway, and I imagine if everybody's going to go through the trouble of being there, they're going to try to build up towards that pillar of Money in the Bank before they could just, spend the rest of the month editing, maybe creating extra content to fill that time, just so that they could rest. I could see them doing that. They did advertise Money in the Bank. They didn't say exactly too much about it, about what was going to be on the show, but they did advertise on the pay-per-view that this was going to take place. So
no, I assume it's happening and everything. It's just a case of like that'll be the next one. It's like, when are you going to tape Money in the Bank? And and an issue that's not really being raised all that much is, how are they getting around the stay-at-home order in Florida? Is it a case that the WWE is just like, they are considered like they're getting a pass, and that they are viewed as important to, whether it be the state of Florida or the city, that they are willing to bypass WWE, that they can go ahead and record these shows?
Well, what's the punishment if they were to get caught?
Well, that's it, Way. It's, we're seeing like there are measures in place. There are recommendations, but everyone is going to police these things differently. I mean, I know, here where we live, there's been an issue with people that are violating certain, social distancing measures and going into areas that have been taped off, and they've flirted with the idea of fines being introduced. But realistically, if you're a company like WWE, are they considered that we're not enforcing this? And what does enforcing mean? What does that even entail?
Of course, this also goes for AEW and Impact, and really any other company that is choosing to create content right now, right?
Impact's going ahead in Nashville with an empty studio shows for 2 months worth of shows that they are in the process of taping as well. So are others going to follow? Like, that to me is, at least looking in the wrestling and MMA space, how many other companies are going to remain with suspended operations, versus looking at this and saying, hey, we're just going to venture out and do this.
It certainly feels like it's a bit of a, I don't even really want to call it a gray area, but because it really isn't. But, I think people are taking the lead from AEW and WWE and seeing that these guys aren't necessarily being punished. They're doing these things in undisclosed places and getting away with it and producing content and making money at this point in time. And I feel like there are going to be plenty of places that will continue to do that if they have the means, until they get forced to not be able to do it. Let's go to one more phone call here as we await the ratings. Neil, our man, what's on your mind?
Hey, Way. Hey, John.
Hey, man.
Yes, I've got a non-wrestling, non-MMA question for both of you this week. A bit like Brandon from New Jersey, I've become somewhat fascinated with Ontario and with Toronto and specifically, just from listening to you guys over the years. So I've learned about O'Grady's Bar. I've learned about, I know there's a cinema in Whitby that you didn't go to, John, that time because it was too far to drive. When you were on the radio, Way, last week, there was an advert for the Riverwood Conservancy in Mississauga. So these are all places I'm fascinated with.
I have no idea what that is.
Well, it sounds fabulous. You can have a heart-healthy walk there, apparently. So these are places maybe I'll go and visit sometime when all of this is over. But at the beginning, this is all a setup for a really ridiculous question. At the beginning of what probably seems like a decade ago to you guys, when you were doing Rewind Away last week on World War III, you were talking about the Raptors playing in the Sky Dome and how horrible it was because, of all of and it sort of went on into a discussion of Toronto in general, Toronto in those days, etc. And John, you jokingly said, "What's your favorite street in Toronto?" And it was unanswered. So I want to know, what is your favorite street in Toronto and why?
John?
Degrassi.
Oh, have you actually been to Degrassi Street? There's really not that much there, is there?
It's just a street. There's nothing special about it.
Yeah.
Does it exist?
Oh yeah.
It's a real street.
Real school.
Yep.
Really? I never knew that because it was the Kids of Degrassi Street was shown over here.
Okay.
Sort of as a kind of in an after school slot. Yeah, so I assumed it was fictional. And
Yeah. My favorite streets in Toronto. I used to be a big fan of Queen West. West Queen West is cool, but these days I love being at home, dude. Like I don't really. I'm such a homebody that I can't really say I have a favorite street. Yonge Street. Yonge Street's pretty great. It's pretty legendary. Neil, I don't know if you know this, John, but or Neil, but it is the longest street in the world. Is that right?
Really?
I don't know. That's what they say.
Well, excellent. I've taken notes on all of those places, and hopefully, when all of this calms down and I can get over, I will visit all of them.
All right. Well, thank you,
Okay,
Neil.
guys.
As always.
Thanks.
Take care.
Cheers. Bye.
So we do have the ratings, John, don't we?
Yes.
Kind of.
No, we do. The best one of all time. Okay. Have you seen them yet?
I have seen them. I've seen one of them. I don't know if you have the other one. Do you?
Okay. I do have both here.
Oh,
okay. So
please.
This is an interesting one. So we said that AEW did 692,000 viewers, and they did a 0.26 in the 18 to 49. So 692,000 viewers.
Yeah.
NXT did 693,000 viewers with a 0.19 in the 18 to 49 demographic.
Oh.
So NXT beat them by 1,000 viewers, but AEW significantly ahead, significantly 0.07 ahead in the 18 to 49 demo. I am simply tweeting this out, and I'm going to make some popcorn after for the comments. Because I think everyone needs some crazy ratings reaction, and that's what I think my Twitter will be for the next several hours.
Yeah. So what do you take from this? Okay, like NXT can certainly claim a victory, but AEW can also claim the victory because of the Prime demo.
I mean, really,
the
Prime demo is how you rank things. So, exactly. I mean, technically, AEW, if you want, I mean, it's such a silly argument, are you? Like, who wins what? But over this slight of a margin. But anyway.
Well, technically, AEW didn't even rank in the top 50, if we're talking.
NXT finished 51st.
51st,
overall.
So barely just out of the top 50.
And AEW finished 32nd.
Mm-hmm.
So
all right.
There you go.
I love it, John. And we look forward to seeing your timeline and your further analysis about everything that's been going on. Thank you.
Oh,
everybody.
wait. Poll result before we go. That'll be
yes.
the final thing here. I did my love it or hate it for Gargano and Ciampa, and the results have, I mean, Way voted hated it, and the official results on my Twitter. Okay, here we go. 666 votes. 51% hated it. 49 loved it.
Divisive as ever, and I think that's what's sparking all this conversation. We appreciate it, everybody. Thank you to everybody who called in. I loved actually a lot of the longer formats of the phone calls. Thank you to the people in the chat room, very active as usual. You can join us every single week at 3 o'clock on Thursday if you're a Café patron. Just go to postwrestlingcafe.com and you can find the link every single Thursday. Any other words, John, before we go?
That's it. We'll be back Friday night. Rewind to SmackDown. Check that out. All of our great shows coming out this week, including Thunderstruck on Sunday with Wai Ting joining the great WH Park. That's it. Goodbye.